To me, they were always kind of the Oxnard band.
When I think of Oxnard, I think Ill Repute.
When I heard Fuck With My Head the first time, you know, I'm into this.
Wow. Another driving force that was from right here in Oxnard.
When I heard them, they were my favorite band from that point on.
I remember having a Sharpie and putting like the Ill Repute logo on my jeans and stuff.
That drive that they had.
I became a fan, that was for sure.
There's like high comedic value in Ill Repute. You didn't get that from some of the other bands.
Sort of born out of the punk movement. I sort of went the hardcore route.
Ill Repute's music is much more than how they play or what they sing about.
It was just completely different, and it was actually had kind of a positive message.
They were just so nice, you know? Like that song Clean Cut American Kids is so, yeah, John Fanister and the whole band.
I'm a clean cut American kid. My mama raised me right, I ain't no skin. I got a job, I pull my own.
When we were younger, there was definitely some weird dysfunctions going on. And I don't know, I had tons of anger.
But my mom and dad were, like, they slept in separate rooms. They were just constantly fighting.
We didn't have a lot of anything. Didn't have a lot of money. 4 kids, parents worked hard.
I always felt a little out of place and different. I guess everybody probably does, but you don't realize it.
My father was a Marine Corps colonel when he retired, so I was raised in a very conservative, kind of Catholic household. So whatever it was, it struck a chord that was deep enough where I went, no, I'm not doing this.
John and Jim knew each other. They both lived on the base. They were Navy brats.
First member I met was John, and that's when I moved to Port Hueneme.
He lived across the street from me when we were really young, so we met right off the bat.
Me and Jim went to junior high together, and then Carl and John I met in high school.
At high school, met Carl. He went to a different junior high. And
we had a service club called Interact, which is a high school version of the Rotary, and we became involved with that. I don't know why, but that's where I met Jim and John and Tony, and we just became regular friends.
They were a year ahead of me in school, so I think when that was happening, I must have been 14, 15, when we were going to rock concerts down there yet.
We'd go to concerts sometimes, parties, mischief, a lot of mischief.
Tony, Jim, and I, and Carl, we would go to some rock concerts. I remember a whole group of us would go.
We used to go to the Forum and see, who did we see? We saw Queen, Boston, Van Halen.
I remember getting some tickets to Van Halen and through a friend, and Tony and Jim going.
Cars, Boston I think was in there up in the first, Queen.
I'm a huge Bad Company fan.
I don't know if what other music was out there, but we were, in our isolated little world, and that was the music we would listen to.
I had, milk crates full of, Ted Nugent, Boston, all that stuff. And then when punk came along, I literally gave all those crates away.
I'd heard the term punk rock and maybe had seen stuff on TV or something. I really didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it meant. I knew I didn't really like the music at first.
I can't even remember hearing about it, but I remember Jim showing up to the house with this album called Saturday Night Pogo. And it was an English album with all these different bands on it.
And then John had a friend, this guy Tom Niemeyer, and he used to listen to a lot of punk rock. So John got a couple records from him and brought over Sex Pistols and the Dickies, and we started listening to that, and just knowing that there's a whole nother type of music thing going on out there, which was real exciting.
It was exciting, definitely. It's very, it was exactly where I wanted to be.
First punk show was the Dickies and Suburban Lawns at the Roxy.
Well, it's funny because, you know, we were still kind of new to punk rock, and that Saturday Night Pogo was kind of half new. I don't even know if that was, but we didn't know the difference between new wave and punk.
We didn't know what punk rock, the LA punk rock scene, or, you know, what was going on, so we were kind of new wave looking or whatever.
We had these shirts, and they were like striped shirts, total new wave. We cut the sleeves off, and we go to that first show.
You go in and it was such a free-for-all.
You know, they started slamming and stuff, and we're going, oh my God, what the hell is that?
They're targeting you, kind of. Like, they're not just fully going up to you and doing anything, but they're targeting you. They'll jump off stage and they'll purposely hit you.
And I remember Tony got in the pit, and he was in there for a while, and then he comes back out, he's like, man, those guys are picking on me, Jim. We got to get those guys.
I go, let's mix it up with these guys and stuff. And Jim was just like, no, don't, man. Just be cool and stuff.
There's all these tough-looking LA punks, and I'm like, oh, Tony, no, we'll just stand over here for the rest of the show.
And then it got to this one point where they were in my face, and I was just sitting there going, fuck you to the guy's face. And I think that's the only thing that kept him back, was I was so aggro about just going, fuck you.
Then after the show, this big dude with chains coming across and a tank top and big muscles comes up. He's like, hey, where are you guys from? And we're all, from Oxnard. He's like, yeah, you guys seem pretty cool dudes. Why don't you come check out my band next week, or whatever it was. And it was John Macias from Circle One.
And they started going to these shows, and I find out that they'd come back, you know, guys with bruised faces, bruised heads.
And we started meeting other people that were in bands and hearing their bands and stuff.
Mike Vallejo and John talked us into forming our own band. They're all, oh, it's easy, you guys should, you know, make a band. All you need to know is bar chords.
And I don't want to say it's because it looked easy or nothing, but it just, there was an organic feeling of that's what you do, you know, hey, you've got music in you.
So we said, all right, let's make ourselves a band.
And we go, we could do this, let's start a band and stuff. And I go, yeah. He goes, you play guitar, right? I go, yeah, I know how to strum a couple chords. Like 2.
I said, oh, I'll sing then. You know, I'll be the singer, but then we'll just see what we can pick out from there.
It was me and Jim, and then we had always talked about getting John in.
They had already had the idea for this band, and I guess they always had the idea that I was in it.
Called John, hey John, come on up, and we're making this band, we need a bass player.
And Jim already came up with the name Ill Repute. Cool, so I was the bass player, and Jimmy was the singer, and Tony played guitar.
The drummers were real scarce around here, and you know, I think the 1 or 2 punk rock drummers were already in a couple of bands, and we didn't know any drummers except Carl. We knew Carl.
Carl was the only guy we knew that played drums, but he was not into punk rock at all.
I did not want to be. I said, hey, I love you guys, but you guys do your own punk rock thing. I don't want anything to do with it.
Had this big blazer that said Bad Company on the back, and I remember, yeah, we'll get Carl to play drums.
I'm a huge Bad Company fan.
So we'd beg Carl, hey Carl, you know, he'd play with his brother in a Bad Company type band.
How I got into the band was Jim was having a punk rock party, and I go there and I saw all these chicks there, and I thought, wow, there's chicks in punk rock, and a lot of these chicks were cute. And I remember going to their house. I remember going up to Jim and Tony that night at the party. It's okay, when do we start practicing?
The thing that amazes me is that Carl was able to play that fast, because he came out of playing Living After Midnight, songs like that.
Well, we practiced at my old house over on J Street in the garage.
We wrote some songs, you know, and they came pretty naturally and stuff. I think our first song was I Won't Kill For You.
We were fully into this, and it was like a progression. Suddenly Carl was just like sitting on his drum stool. Okay, you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, and just blowing into like I Won't Kill For You, our first song that was like, you know, 500 beats per second.
So then, yeah, we started writing songs, playing them, and then I don't know if it was because John was having trouble on the bass.
I remember playing the bass, and I think I wasn't good at it.
He's like, you know what, guys? I really can't play bass.
Jim started playing the bass and, you know, practicing with me and Tony. And after a while, he said, you know what, I'd rather just be the bass player. Let's just let John be the singer.
So me and John traded. I started playing bass and he started singing, and
then that was the lineup. So it was me became, me guitar, Jim on bass, John singing, and Carl at drums.
All of us were in place, and we just started practicing almost every night. We were just nothing else to do in town.
Our first couple songs Tony wrote. He wrote the words and the music.
Tony was a creative machine.
Writing a song to me isn't just the guy who comes up with the chords. You know, some guy comes up with the chords and a little bit of it, but it's the whole band together.
I wasn't really good at writing some lyrics. I wrote one or two, the whole song, but I would come up with some music and go, hey Tony, let's try this, and then Tony would put words to it, and then the band would perform it.
So it was sort of, once it got to a certain point, it was real hands-on, and we would just turn it into this song. And
we would just, after work or whatever we were doing, go to Carl's house. We had our big song list.
I mean, we had this refrigerator box or something that was like had 50 songs on it, and we would just go through all of them.
Every time we'd write a new song, we'd just add it to the list.
Eventually, like, new ones would come and add to the bottom, and then we wouldn't have time to play more, so our set list was sort of, you know, getting fine-tuned.
Our first paid gig was a place called the Alano Club.
John had a friend whose mom was involved in the Al-Anon Club.
The guy's mom needed a band for her dance.
And they said, so John, you have a band, right? And you go, yeah, you want to play our New Year's party at the AA club? And I was going, I don't think you really want, it's really fast. No, you can't play fast enough for us.
And you know, I guess she just didn't know what punk rock was. She just thought music was music.
And I'm going, well, you know, I don't think do you have a tape or something? I go, we have tapes in the garage, but I don't think you really want, no, come on. And so finally she goes, it pays $75, something. Okay.
We even gave her a demo tape with our punk rock stuff on it. I don't think she ever listened to it because she just goes, oh yeah, that's great, yeah, you're hired.
So we show up there, and it was a fucking disaster.
The open with Rapid Pulse was just the song just goes like this, and they're just looking at us like this. They go, you're just fucking with us, right? Or they didn't say that exactly, but they just go, okay, you scared us.
I see the lady who hired us like trying to dance, you know, trying like to pull off her decision, and everybody was like, what the?
They're out there trying to dance and just try to be nice.
Next thing you know, they're all outside smoking, you know.
They could only last maybe three, 4 songs, and literally the place cleared out, and we had like our 6 friends right there in front of us.
I don't know what they thought, those poor people.
They hand us the envelope, and we're like, they still paid us $150. Yes.
That was our first like official paid gig. We got paid for our first gig, which was impressive.
And we're getting kind of like a buzz, like, hey, there's a new band, you know, they're pretty good.
We met the guys in Dr. No and the Beer Guts and Aggression, and so we had friends, and we were part of the Oxnard punk rock community.
We played at the Port Hueneme Community Center, and at this time we had become pretty good friends with the guys from Circle One.
We got Circle One to come and headline.
But that was the first actual punk show. We opened it. It was like $3, $2 with, or $1 off with the flyer, so it was a $2 show.
Well, Circle One played, and Aggression was already out at that time. I think Dr. No had already started to play a little bit.
And we opened, and that was our first show in front of our peers, you know, and we were nervous as hell.
You know, there was a lot of kids from LA came down to Port Hueneme, this little community center.
This is our first official gig right here, man. The very first one.
Hueneme Community Center.
But when they start having these local shows is where we met all the guys in other bands, and then the scene was sort of really, you know, starting to solidify for sure.
This was Ill Repute's first official show, besides parties and besides, and it was right here at this Hueneme Community Center.
Only $3.
$3.
It was just great because every punk for Ventura County came. I mean, you know, there were little pods, you know, little punk pods everywhere. And I think that was the first show I remember everybody being together.
Yeah, I kind of remember that show. I remember something about a guitar.
The guitar that I helped Tony buy, 6-7 years earlier, hard-earned money digging through dumpsters. Big Bob grabs it You know, Tony had already played a different guitar, though he didn't have his old guitar. He broke it on stage at the end of the show.
I'm not real sure. I was in Aggression at the time, and I don't know anything about the guitar. I don't even have to pass on knowledge of that and disavow any knowledge of the guitar.
I don't remember if it was intentional, if it was staged or not, but I think I destroyed the guitar.
It was all done like Bob grabbed my guitar all aggro and broke it and stuff.
Because Tony's guitar was already broken, and he goes, yeah. And it was Tony's idea. Yeah, smash my guitar on the stage.
So people were talking about it for a long time afterwards.
And I was thinking, wow, I mean, it was kind of a cool punk thing, but I thought, I dove into dumpsters to buy that guitar. Here you go, smashing it on stage.
I think it was all in fun.
It was, it was a fun night. It was looking back, it was a really good first punk show.
I think what happened was Aggression went in, they got on BYO, they were kicking ass, and they were from Oxnard. So then when another band came from Oxnard, Dr. No, I think might have had a few LA shows before us. So then when we came, it was like, oh, another band from Oxnard, let's check these guys out.
It's always been a pecking order of when the band came out, of who was headlining over here. So Aggression came out first, there's no question about that. But us and Dr. No came out about the same time. And then Stalag, False Confession, all the other bands came after it.
No, the scene in Oxnard, and the Goleta Valley Community Center, and the Casa Tropical, and I just remember it being so tight.
All the bands got along very well.
And who knew that all this music would come out, great bands come out of this little area?
For some reason, there's something in the water in Oxnard that there was a lot of just phenomenal musicians.
To me, that it was all very unique. Every band had their own sound.
I mean, because everybody's picking up steam now in the 80s, and people are aware of the sounds that these bands are putting out.
The scene back in the day was really cool because, again, we were so few, and again, we were limited in venues where we could perform, but because of the limited numbers, the NARDCORE scene had a really strong bond with each other.
The term NARDCORE, exactly when it came about, I don't know, but I know somehow Ismael Hernandez came up with it.
Tony and John from Ill Repute started using, they were the first people that I heard using the term hardcore to describe music. I mean locally, and so I just said, Oxnard hardcore, NARDCORE. I mean, it was a pretty simple thing to do.
Hardcore from Oxnard. And so he just went, somehow he said NARDCORE, and everybody laughed, and he wrote it.
And I kind of said it as a joke, I remember. It was Tony and Brandon Cruz and somebody else were at my house, and we were leaving, and I said, everybody's fucking hardcore, we're NARDCORE.
Nowadays, there's a joke about I'm the mayor of NARDCORE and stuff like that.
I'm pretty sure that Tony was the one who kind of started using it.
But I don't know how that came about, but really it's like I'm the cheerleader of I'm the loudest cheerleader of NARDCORE is all I am. I'm not the mayor or nothing. I'm just a person that screams about it the loudest. So we had all these songs we had written, and songs are like a minute long. Some songs are literally less than a minute. Some are like, probably the longest one would be 2 minutes. So we had like 50 songs before I think we ever recorded.
I know the first place we recorded was not far from here. Right now it's called Goldmine Studios, and they would have this all-night deal for $100, I think it was, you could record from like 10 all night, like the whole dark hours of the day.
And to them, it was a rock studio. To them, okay, a band would come in and do 3 songs, and they would do it, and we go in there and we just bust out like 20 songs, and the guy's freaking out like, another, okay, and with no care of like getting it right or perfect, we just blast through. Okay, we didn't know what we were doing, we just played.
So after we did those demos at Goldmine, we were still going to a lot of shows and meeting a lot of people in LA.
Jim became friends with a girl named Meg. And Meg knew Rodney Bingenheimer
from Rodney on the Rock, and gave him I'm going to give him your demo.
She took the tape and played him Clean Cut American Kid, and he liked it. He played it on his radio show.
Turns out that he put out this best of, or like the Rodney of the Rock, and he wanted one of our songs for it.
And we knew Clean Cut American Kid. We knew that was an instant hit. It was just kind of snappy and catchy and stuff.
I'm a clean cut American kid. My mama raised me right, I ain't no skin. I got a job, I pull my own. Got a place I can call my home. I'm a clean cut American kid.
We were at that point where we were just kind of troublemakers, and we had a shaved head, and someone referred to us as being clean-cut American kids, and we thought that was funny because we thought of ourselves, or we were by definition probably the least clean-cut. We were raising hell.
So we went to Posh Boy Studios to record the song. And I think we went in there maybe with a little bit of attitude.
Robbie Fields, the producer, yelled at us once we were looking at some Playboy magazines in there. Hey, put that down, you know.
They put that on Rodney on the Rock 3, in which, that was, it was awesome. We were barely a band a year, and we had a song on a Rodney on the Rock album.
Coming out on that, you suddenly were recognized in not just LA, but all these different cities. People knew your name, and Rodney on the Rock at the time was kind of a big deal.
First time I heard Ill Repute, probably on Rodney on the Rock. Clean Cut American Kid. It was a hook.
Mystic came into play somewhere around that, shortly after that.
There was a guy doing a compilation called Welcome to Slimy Valley.
Somehow we got asked to put a song on there, so we put a song on there.
And we had to go to Mystic to record it.
They somehow met Doug Moody. They offered bands to record records there.
He kind of saw something in it. And he would say, he's an English guy, he goes, it reminds me of the black bands back in the 50s. This underground sound that can't be stopped.
He liked the punk scene. He liked what it stood for.
He ended up asking us if he wanted to let him distribute our stuff and put out a record.
I think he was saying, hey, you know what? I do put out records for just bands or whatever, and I'd like to do one with you guys.
And we were like, yeah, for sure. And we were in the garage, playing up until then.
Mystic at that time was in the business of recording as many bands as he could.
He was just getting as many bands as he could because he just saw that we had no other opportunities.
And they told us, well, if you guys come up with half the money, we'll let you come out with a record. We found the money through another high school friend of ours, Mike Terry, funded the band.
He wanted to be a record producer or whatever, I don't know. But Mike Terry actually put up the money for us to do a 7-inch. So he was supposed to work it out with Mystic.
So he met with Doug Moody, signed a record contract with them.
So we went in and we recorded Land of No Toilets.
I remember listening to Ill Repute's first 7-inch, Oxnard, Land of No Toilets.
I heard the song on Rodney on the Rock before that, but this was the first time I got to really hear some substance, a chunk of their music.
My friend's brother bought it and we went over there and we just kept listening to it. And I remember looking at the cover and just couldn't believe that they were local guys.
Okay, across the street from where I grew up and where Ill Repute first practice place was, right here on the infamous J Street ditch.
It's where the cover of Land of No Toilets was taken. For some reason we spray painted the IR symbol with the noose and then wrote Oxnard off the O of the noose.
Well, we decided to take the photo, taking a leak because there's no toilets here in Oxnard.
Yeah, Land of No Toilets. So.
I was peeing, John.
I think I peed.
Well, what were you doing, Tony?
Diarrhea.
The first tour would have been in 1983, and we Land of No Toilets. We just had released that.
We were groveling so hard. It's amazing to think that we were able to do all that without cell phones and email.
There was no cell phones. There was no GPS. You just got in and went.
I know we went to Kansas, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and I think we went up north as well.
So we did the Western United States tour.
My family never went on vacations, so for me it was awesome. It was hey, I finally get to travel and see the world.
We were in my old Chevy Love pickup.
And 2 of us are riding back of an open truck.
2 in the front, 2 of us laying in the back in sleeping bags and pulling a trailer.
We didn't have a shelf. So whoever sat in the back was exposed to the elements. So we had to do a summer tour. But the summer tours were freaking hot. And so whoever sat in the back would just get baked all day long.
It was just so funny. We'd be going across country all the way to to New York or something, and it would be me and Tony would usually be in the back just baking in the summer. You know, it'd be 114 degrees.
Well, the stories about me is that I used to throw up before every show. That was like nerves or whatever. And it's like, you know, the joke was, Carl, did you throw up yet? It's like we weren't ready unless I had thrown up. Well, we're in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I was just in extreme pain, and I'm just sweating. I probably had like 103 fever, didn't go to the doctor or anything, and I barely had just enough energy to play my drum set, and I just slept the rest of the time. Well, we got home from tour, and I go to the doctor, and I found out that the nerves had compromised my appendix, and I had to get it taken out. And after I got that appendix taken out, never threw up again before a show.
But that was a fun trip. Yeah, we had a good time on that trip.
I remember it was pretty much all good memories. Yeah, all good shows, all good memories, except for the breakdowns.
That's when we kind of, I think, came into our own as far as we had we kind of had that experience of being in the studio, and then we were practicing and playing live a lot.
That's really when I saw Ill Repute, where I knew that they were going to be a big band.
It's really cool just to hear the music from the record to, you know, live. I couldn't believe it.
Ill Repute shows back then were always, everything was super ridiculously fast.
Yeah.
Like how did they play that fast? You know,
Their sound was amazing and energetic, and they were just a great band.
And I was really surprised with Ill Repute's, like how much fun they injected into their set.
Your 9th, 10th grade, they're, you know, kind of idolize those guys, man. They were playing, they were playing all these really good gigs in LA.
I'll tell you, one of the things that sticks out in my mind is Cherokee Nation, because I'm old enough to remember the Sonny and Cher show. So I mean, when they did that cover, it's like, it's just, you know, it's like, wow. I mean, I knew the song already. Everybody knew the song, and it's like a chant song. The crowd gets into it, and when John's out there, he's just leading the crowd, and it's just awesome.
For the guys with the mohawks. They took the whole Cherokee Nation.
John's a wild man, crazy. He's a great, great lyricist.
Tony's the only punk guitarist I know that plays full chords.
Yeah.
So he had this really distinct style.
Jimmy's bass always really cuts through, and you can really hear his little bass fills. I think he was probably, in the NARDCORE scene, he was probably the best bass player, I think.
Carl was very serious about his drum playing. Very good. We used to laugh about how he religiously wore his Bad Company t-shirts and his Bad Company visors.
I'm a huge Bad Company fan.
Ill Repute kind of had a really pure kind of Southern California hardcore sound, I thought.
I think that we were sort of gaining momentum as a band. That is where we really came on to our own, and we started working on the new stuff, and that's where What Happens Next came from. That's probably where we peaked. You know, we were kind of coming up, and we went into that studio, and we just kind of had good momentum.
And when we put out What Happens Next, there was a great reaction from everybody, and we started touring a little bit, and we always had great reaction everywhere we went.
I thought that What Happens Next, the first 12-inch, was fantastic, actually. I think it's like one of the best for that time period. It's one of like the classic hardcore records.
After that record was where the shows got the strongest, I think, and the scene was really good. The music and the touring and the people, it was really good. That was the best time, definitely.
The first wave of the band, that was pretty much its peak. We were playing huge shows down in LA.
A lot of it's just a blur, those, because it's like every week or a couple times a week, either playing or at all these shows, and they just kind of all blend together a bit.
That's when we were just going full bore, just doing whatever was happening, and I was really not even paying attention, just point me in the direction of where to show up. We'll play, we'll run around, we'll get drunk, we'll do whatever. But they were amazing shows.
It was very bittersweet because we were pretty much at our peak, but at the same time where I had met my first wife, and I, just started drawing away from the band.
Around probably 87, 88, it started getting to be a little bit of a drag playing.
Things in the scene got really violent.
It didn't matter who was playing. You're up there playing, and you don't even see the people paying attention to you, or they don't care. They just met there to fight.
There was gangs, but there was a lot of fights.
And you'd be playing, and all of a sudden everybody's gone. If there's some fight going on, it
seemed like a lot of times we were just the background music for punk rock fights.
It sort of became less important to us. I think the scene kind of developed into something else.
And it got really crazy, and more than just crazy, it was just kind of sickening, and it was really what caused the first, and I don't want to say breakup. We didn't break up. We just didn't feel like playing anymore.
And that's what happened. We quit playing for a couple of years.
I ended up going to the School of Music in LA and learning guitar at the GIT, it was called.
John didn't feel like we were becoming as musical as we should be, and he decided, I'm going to be the guitarist.
Well, anyway, when I graduated from that, I called those guys and said, hey, let's do another record.
The reason we came back to playing, it's just in you. I mean, it's like you're just hooked, kind of, so you miss it.
They started writing songs, and they started playing them, and they said, well, let's call Carl up and let's start jamming with him and see where this goes. And we thought, well, we might as well call Jim too. And so that's when we wrote that whole era of the Transition album.
And I think it was, Mystic got back involved and said, let's do another record. And so we didn't really have the punk rock thing was at this part of the cycle, it's down here.
We were trying to do some softer, different stuff, or I wouldn't say softer, but more rock and more technical.
Broke away from being a hardcore band into being more of a rock band.
The music started to change. We kind of mellowed it out.
When we went in there and recorded, it was this mismatch of just weird stuff, and it was more like we just wanted to record.
A lot of that was just messing around recording, not actually meant to go on an album.
The songs are catchy. I like them. It was beyond our talent level.
It put us in this place where we were writing these songs that required actual skill.
We started doing the final mix, and we thought, we can't release this stuff. Our fans will go nuts. They'll hate us.
The sound was so different from anything else that they had done. You listen to what happens next, and you listen to Transition, and it's like, this is not the same band. How can this be the same band?
I mean, clearly Ill Repute got a little experimental, and that's very admirable. I think it's important to think outside of the box and try new things. But I think it was to their detriment, because they really alienated their fan base.
I can understand why at the time people might have freaked out, but I mean, it's still sounds like Ill Repute to me. It's still Tony. It still sounds like Ill Repute to me. It doesn't seem that different to me.
We were just trying to be a band and play what we were having fun playing or whatever.
One of the first shows back, though, we played. It was in East LA, and Operation IV, which went on to become Rancid, were the buzz band back then. But we were Ill Repute coming back. We actually were headlining above Operation IV, but we were still in that weird phase. And I think so what the plan was, we opened with Been a Long Time Since I Rock and Rolled by freaking Led Zeppelin. That did not go over good. And then we played a couple of Transition stuff and some other stuff, and the crowd just was not liking it.
I don't know if they were gang kids or whatever. They didn't seem like regular punk kids. Started throwing clothes at us. There was a donation box at the club.
All of a sudden, here comes a rolled up pair of blue jeans. Here comes a shirt.
And they were yelling, play the old stuff. And I remember saying, we got some stuff coming. We had the older stuff coming near the end. But we never made it that far.
I don't know, I was getting mad. And I told myself, all right, the next person that throws something, I'm going to go punch him or something. Probably not the smartest thing, but...
So we're playing, and all of a sudden this jacket lands right on Jim's face. Jim, in the middle of the song, puts his bass down, and the other three of us are still playing.
Jim takes off his bass, jumps off stage and just clocks the dude.
Knocks the guy out. His friend tries to jump in. Jim turns, knocks him out.
Then we just all of a sudden, just like a tidal wave against us. Like everybody just turned on us.
And then I don't know what happened after that. I just know all hell broke loose.
A full riot breaks out. I mean, all these guys, and now, next thing you know, people are up on stage trying to kick our ass.
And then I remember just standing there like this, like protecting the equipment. I was just going, fuck, we got all this equipment. And I'm just standing like this, and all of a sudden, I barely see out of the corner of my eye this guy like this, and he throws this full beer can and it hits me right in the nose.
All this commotion's going on. It had one of those steel doors, those auditorium stages. They had to let that down just to keep us safe.
Then we heard there was people with guns outside. It was just fucking crazy. We just get our shit and get out of here. We just fucking jammed.
Tony caught a beer can in the lip. Mace was getting sprayed everywhere, but yeah, it was not a smart choice on my part.
So I think we took another hiatus after that.
Okay, so after the Transition album came out, we pretty much broke up again. And then now we're going into the early 90s. And once again, you know, John and Tony said, hey, I wrote some new songs. Let's get together. All right. So we get together.
When John got back, when the whole band got back together, it was kind of a big deal within the punk community. Like, Ill Repute's back. This is like 91, 92.
And the new song, you know, we all sat around and we said, if we're going to be the band Ill Repute, we've got to write songs in the original Ill Repute style.
But it was just sort of like more like of a melodic kind of driving thing. So we came up with all these new songs.
At the time, I was kind of, you know, makeshift manager, booking agent of the band, like an unheralded fifth member. So they kind of looked to me for some advice. And at the time, they had 2 record deals on the table. One was from Bill from Dr. Strange.
At that time, a lot of bands were approaching me because Dr. Strange was actually a very popular label.
And the other record deal was from a guy named Mike Burkett, who played in this band called No Effects. You know, in '91, didn't mean anything. I told the guys, hey, listen, Fat Mike, he put out one record with this band called Lagwagon, which actually sounds more metal than punk. And then you have Bill, who just put out this Guttermouth record and put out Voodoo Glow Skulls. It's selling like 20,000 units. Bill's really tied into the punk community. Mike's gonna be too busy with his band, touring all these little shows, you know, making $30 a show, what have you. He's not gonna have time to put into you guys. I say you guys go with Bill from Dr. Strange.
I just remember being very excited, thinking, oh man, Ill Repute on Dr. Strange. That's something else.
And we kind of did this other record, Big Rusty Balls.
They came up with the name Big Rusty Balls because I think it was just a convenient title. There were all these huge, big, rusty balls on the shore of, I don't know what beach, like Port Hueneme or something up by those guys. I don't know what they're for.
And the songs were, you know, still hardcore, but we left some room for some creativity and something a little softer.
We put out this album, and that was actually a little bit different, but not as different as Transitions.
Big Rusty Balls is definitely a departure from their old stuff. It's a departure from their Transition record, which a lot of people would say, good. We were really lucky when they recorded Big Rusty Balls. They had a good friend, Jerry Finn, which later became a really sought-after producer. He's an old NARDCORE guy, and this is right before he did Dookie, Green Day's Dookie.
We were his first band that he produced on his own.
So he produced, engineered at Paramount Records, Big Rusty Balls, and if you listen to that record, it's a phenomenal sounding release.
Now this became Tony's showcase as a vocalist. This is the first album that he shared the vocals with John.
Tony sang half the songs or so on Big Rusty Balls. We kind of shared the vocals and shared the writing. We kind of wrote each other, and we wrote songs.
Tony wrote some great songs on that album. I mean, it's on my iPod. I still listen to that album all the time. I think that was some of my more simpler but better drum work. And I was really proud of this album. I think we all were.
I don't want to say it's like a pop punk record. It's still very punk, but there's also aspects of rock in there. But they just do it so well, in my opinion. They played well. The music was great. The production was great.
So we put out this Big Rusty Balls album. It's actually it's not out yet. It's about to come out. We have Eddie Numbskull booking this whole U.S. tour.
So we booked this Ill Repute Big Rusty Balls tour. It was kind of like their big coming out party. Their Ill Repute's back, big U.S. tour type deal.
Ill Repute was very serious. They wanted to do a tour, you know, and do it the right way. So I was willing, you know, to make tour posters, a lot of ads, which I always did, a lot of promos.
Dr. Strange sent posters to every club, and it was well publicized, what have you. And just before the tour was supposed to kick off, John Faniff quit.
There was some pretty good momentum behind that record, and I was going to France. I would go surfing in the summer, and I'd take a lot of time down there in France, and I'd bought my airline tickets, and I was all set to go one time.
John all of a sudden says, "Hey, I can't do it."
And we're like, what?
And we're like, well, what do you mean you can't do it? We've been planning this. We got this Oregon show first, and then we got this other tour for this. The album's coming out in 2 weeks, and then we got this whole tour planned around it.
You know, we obviously do this album comes out, and we're booking a tour, and John says, oh, I can't go because I've got tickets to go surfing in Europe.
And so that's when there was a bit of an ultimatum put on me.
It was kind of like somehow it became an ultimatum. It's like, do this, or we're going to do it without you, we're going to go on. Well, he goes, well, what, am I getting kicked out of the band? He goes, no, you're making the choice. It was one of those things, you know.
I remember these are the words. You were making a choice. You would rather go surfing than go on tour with us.
Well, needless to say, I went to France.
And he couldn't make it back for the tour, but we had the whole tour booked, so we just decided to continue on as best we could. Didn't really want to, but, did it.
We were determined to still go on tour.
And from a booking agent standpoint, to tell the entire country that the frontman for the tour that you just booked for your first time isn't coming, no fun.
I was in contact with Tony, and the other guys felt really bad, like they let me down, and I didn't really take it that way. I really give those guys a lot of credit for, sucking it up and continuing on, and, they did it.
It was rough. It was my first time ever having to play and sing. But we did it. I mean, I wasn't totally not used to it because I would do it during practice sometimes.
We didn't play a lot of earlier stuff, and we played all the standard stuff. But basically just the ones that Tony could sing.
People were expecting John, and last minute he couldn't make it. But Tony sang good, but no band, you want to hear what you hear on the record, and when there's a different singer, you're not, it's not the same.
They powered on through the tour and they kicked ass and owned almost every city, but it was still a difficult thing to deal with.
We called our friend Mike Vallejo from Circle One, great guitar player, knew our songs. If the ones he didn't know, he could pick up in an hour, whatever.
We did the U.S. in two halves. So we did the western half, and we came home, and then we did the eastern half.
So we get back, and now we go on tour, and we're saying, Mike, can you go with us? And he couldn't do it. He couldn't commit to the whole tour. He did some of them, and then he had to come home, and then we had this other guy who we had to teach. I mean, it was a nightmare. We were teaching him the songs on the road.
And we get up to Minnesota, and then I have a falling out with Jim, but at the same time, we realized we can't afford to keep this guy. So we sent him home from Minnesota. So the rest of the tour was just a three-piece. It was just, power trio, me, Tony, and Jim.
And I'm really proud of him for doing that, but it was still a really difficult time to kind of navigate that entire run without John Faniff, the frontman.
The shows were okay. They weren't horrible. They weren't great.
You know, we had a hard time. Punk rock wasn't, I mean, I don't know even if John was there, if it would have been the greatest thing, because, you know, you're playing Coeur d'Alene, Idaho on a Tuesday night at the local sports bar.
We're about to turn around and go home. Like somewhere in the middle of the tour, there was a lot of cancellations.
Promoters got scared. They didn't want to follow through on the commitment without the frontman.
It was grueling. We were all a little older, and we got back, and you know, we were just talking and just saying, you know, I think Carl was the one that actually said, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore right now. I just want to focus on my work and whatever else.
I had met my future second wife and got involved, you know, with other things. I thought that's more important. You know, like my son at the time would have been 7 or 8, so I figured, this is what I need to do. I need to just take care of my family.
Obviously, I think we took another hiatus after that. All right, so there was another hiatus after the Big Rusty Balls tour, and then you miss it. You want to play still. You want to do stuff.
Then I think we got back into it with. We had a couple drummers after Carl.
So it was me and Jim, and we get Joey, who was the Stalag 13's original drummer.
And this was probably '94, and we started playing again with him.
So we're playing, and Joey wants to do a label, so he starts doing all this stuff, and he's going, let's do Ill Repute, let's do a new album. We write these songs. The music's kind of changing. It's getting a little poppier.
That's when we did Bleed. That was just me and Tony and Joel and Nashaya.
The Fat Records era, that was really good music. And when I listened to what Ill Repute was doing then with that Bleed and Now and that stuff, it was good pop punk kind of stuff.
From that point to where Ill Repute ended up later, which was just me singing with all different people, is really weird, right? And I would never want to be Ill Repute without those guys. But the way that happened was throughout the time period, it was just like one member leaving at a time.
When John left the band and then we kept on going with Tony singing, we probably should have changed the name of the band.
Because it wasn't Ill Repute from back then. People, not that they even would have cared at that point, but if they would have just had a good name and came into their own, it probably could have been, you know, probably could have gone somewhere, I think, because there was good music there.
After that album came out, and I don't remember playing a lot of shows, I think just up and down California, Cobalt and stuff, Jim left.
Yeah, it was time for me. I wasn't having fun anymore, and Tony really should have changed the name of the band when I left too.
And then I kept going. So now it's literally me, but it was like slow. So like we had played blocks. So to me it felt like, okay, Jim was with Ill Repute. Now we got changed another member, but we've been playing for 2 years and whatever. So at the end it looks like we should have been Ill Repute, just me, but it was a slow change. So then there was a period after everybody left. It was just me and Joey. And Joey still wanted to do his label. He still wanted to do Ill Repute. And we got Joe Rivas and Forrest and this guy Chris.
The funny thing is, I think that Joe Liebke actually told me that, oh, Ill Repute's looking for a guitarist. Yeah. And you know, you should come audition.
You know, Tony just hit me up, said, hey, you know, I kind of want 2 guitars to make a fuller sound.
So it was 2 guitars, and I was just singing then. And Joe and Forrest were playing guitar, and this guy Chris was on bass, and Joey was on drums.
We were able to walk into a very beautifully laid foundation.
And we did an album called And Now. And Now was pretty much Forrest wrote all those songs. I think I wrote a couple.
But I do have to say, is one thing that you have to understand with us is being a little bit younger, like, you know, since these were our influences, you know what I mean? Like being asked to play for Ill Repute would almost be like one of them being asked to play for the Ramones.
Bleed and Now, I think, are really good albums. I just don't think they should have been released as Ill Repute. I think they would have got a lot more legs to them if it was a whole different band.
Yeah, so it was kind of weird it being called Ill Repute. So Tony,
I mean, it was an honor to us. To be in the band under that name and all that, but
it didn't sound like Ill Repute.
Yeah.
I just truly think that the Ill Repute name was an anchor on that band.
It was fun, it was good stuff, but it just wasn't Ill Repute.
Years later, there was a benefit show planned for Mark Hickey of Aggression, who passed away, and it was going to be at the Ventura Theater. A lot of these bands were going to play, a lot of older bands, and we kind of somehow got approached and said, yeah, let's do it.
John reached out to us and says, hey, let's do a show.
John and Tony had approached me and said, hey, would you be interested in doing this stuff again? We're going to get this other guy to play bass.
They were talking about getting back together, and they had another bass player. They had Fred Dixon, who was going to play bass, and I saw him talking on some website thing, or heard something, or was on an email chain somehow. But I'm like, hey, you guys are, a lot of those songs you guys are playing are, because they wanted to play all the old stuff. I go, those are kind of my songs. I wouldn't mind, being a part of it too.
So Jim shows up for a couple of practices, and it sounded great. It probably sounded better than it ever did.
But the practicing was so funny because we were laughing so hard at these songs, because now here we are, kind of adults, and kind of laughing at some of the stuff, what some of the phrases and the lyrics are funny. And
we get a reunion show booked at the Ventura Theater with Guttermouth. So this is going to be the return of Ill Repute.
Carl was married and really religious. He's still pretty religious, but he was not into. He I can do it every third Tuesday when I don't have fellowship,
And this is the way I describe it: as God would have it, the show got canceled. Then they moved it to a different venue. That show got canceled. So then at that point in time, I said, okay, I'm done with you guys.
Not any personal issues with us. He just, that's behind me now.
We all talked about what does a real reunion mean. And I told him, in my mind, a reunion is guys playing the style of music that was intended to play. It doesn't matter if it's one guy or all four guys. As long as you're playing the original style of music, then you're still playing the original, what it was intended to do.
I asked Tony, I go, what about your drummer you had for this other band you had? He was good. This guy Chuck.
Tony called me one day and he said, hey, I'm getting all the other guys in Ill Repute, in the old Ill Repute, back together.
And so we went and did a practice gig with him, a practice place at my friend's studio, and it worked.
First show I played with them live was Ojai Women's Community Center.
And so I remember pulling up, and there's this line of kids all the way out around the block.
When we played, everyone in the crowd there was a lot of energy. There was a big pit, so there was a lot of sweat in the air.
Because punk rock music has turned into Good Charlotte, remember them? And Blink-182 and bands like that had taken punk rock to a very poppy level and very commercial level, and there was this big hat throwback on that where people were backlashing on it, and they went back to see these old school bands, and I didn't know that. Next thing you know, we're playing the show, and all these kids are knowing all the words. I was going, oh shit.
The fans are young enough to be their kids, and there's also older people as well.
I asked Austin what bands were the best from the NARDCORE scene, and he immediately said, Ill Repute, dude, you gotta check that band out.
I brought my record player and I put on Ill Repute, and his parents are all pissed. We were freaking pitting in the backyard to a freaking record player.
And within the first minute and a half of listening to it, I knew that they were one of my favorite bands.
We were just listening to the fastest music we'd ever heard. Austin's like, this is NARDCORE, and we're like, oh.
That day is when Bootleg Brigade formed.
People started going, oh, it's Ill Repute, it's the real Ill Repute, playing the 80s stuff from Land of No Toilets and What Happens Next and stuff, and only that stuff.
We were really stoked to see the band play the original, well, it's close to the original, minus Carl.
They do it really well. I think a lot of bands who kind of start out young and then they kind of fade out for a while and they come back older and maybe a little more sober. And they play better, and they're just wow, they really got it down.
I love the lineup they have now. I think Chuck's a great drummer. I think he brings it hard every night.
They're a good band. They've got a lot of power, and they're really fun to see. I mean, you can see the maturity in them, but, you know, other than that, I still think they're the same band, and they still get that same feeling of, like, this is something great.
Golden Voice threw us on their 30-year anniversary show. That was freaking amazing.
The GB30, the Gary Tovar show at Santa Monica Civic a couple years ago, that was awesome.
That was epic. That was huge for us.
And seeing them at that Santa Monica show, that Golden Voice show, man, that almost made me cry.
I never in my wildest dreams ever thought I'd play Santa Monica Civic. And then we're up there, and we did really good.
After our first song at that show, I couldn't really see anywhere past maybe the first line or two of people out in the front. When our first break did come for the set, the crowd emanating just came at me, and I got a big rush out of it. I couldn't sleep that night after that. I was so excited.
Yeah, those times were just really good. It was just all about the music.
As stoked as we were to be in Ill Repute, I'm more stoked now to see Ill Repute.
I really think it's awesome for them to still be doing this, and I think they cleared the way for a lot of other bands from Oxnard.
I've been to Europe and stuff, like all over the world, and anywhere you go, like you mentioned Ill Repute, Dr. No, Stolid 13 or Aggression, like people know those bands.
It's just a good time, man. I'm just happy that I was able to be a part of it and part of that whole wave, because it was, I mean, I know it's going on now, but it was special.
It's also positive. There's a lot of positive messages there.
I don't know, that's the whole message I've gotten from Ill Repute was, you know, a very positive one.
If there's any one band that personifies what Numbskull Productions is all about, that band would be Ill Repute, like hands down.
Whenever I hang out with Ill Repute, even to this day, man, they're just always up, always happy, you know, always ready to do something stupid.
They're still amazing. They still, like, just hit it every time. Every time.
Honestly, with Ill Repute, they're such a good band still. They're probably even better because, like, they practice. They have 30 years of practicing and playing, and I give them so much credit for sticking together.
Those guys will be playing music till the day they die.
I don't see anybody slowing down at the moment, so I think we're good to go.
Maybe someday, you know, if Carl or Chuck decide to take a break, I'll have to sit in with Ill Repute and just say I got to play with them. Then I've kind of closed the door on the whole NARDCORE chapter of being a real drum slut.
I feel like I could do it 10 more years.
I go to every show that I can locally here, especially here in town. I'll either sit in on a couple of songs or I'll jump on stage and sing backing vocals with them and stuff like that. John always gives me a proper introduction, and the crowd loves it.
And I was thinking today, we need to do a new record. You know, we really should. I think when I've mentioned to Tony, I'd love to sit down and with Tony and Jim and everybody and write a new record. It would be so fun. I think I'm a little nervous about taking on that endeavor, but at the same time, I think we could probably pull off something worth listening to.
You know, I'm not interested in trying to join the band back up, but if you ever need me, you know, Chuck can't do a show, I can do it.
To be continued, I guess.